February 1813. Tower of London. 3 in the morning. I should not be here. My hands are shaking. Not much, just enough to feel that my body knows something before I admit it. The crown is in front of me. Old, heavy, set with that red stone I have been trying not to look at. Yesterday, under the microscope, I saw something I did not like. This afternoon, I told the council that the stone was genuine. But now, alone in the tower, I am not sure I told them the truth. If I was not mistaken, then for 450 years, British monarchs have been wearing something very different from what they believed. I breathe in, adjust the lens, lean closer, and look. My name is George Davis. I am the royal gemologist. The history of this stone does not begin in Britain. Its first documented trail appears in the year 1367 in Seville during the Reconquista. At that time, the stone belonged to Abu Sa'id, a prince of Granada. His emirate was weakening. Cities were lost. Influence was fading. Every decision he made carried the weight of a kingdom collapsing around him. So he sought negotiation with Pedro I of Castile, a king whose reputation still demands caution. Pedro welcomed him with formality. Guards, ceremony, a meeting arranged according to protocol. But behind the polished surface stood a man known across the region as Pedro the Cruel. In the 14th century, such names were rarely exaggerated. During the meeting, Abu Sa'id was killed on Pedro's command. When his possessions were examined, a large red stone was found among them. Its size, clarity, and depth of color made it stand out immediately. Pedro took it into his treasury as valuable spoils, but his power was already slipping. In 1366, Pedro's half-brother, Henry of Trastamara, rose against him. Civil war followed. Pedro understood he could not win alone. He needed a commander capable of changing the outcome entirely. That commander was Edward, the Black Prince, heir to the English throne, one of the most skilled leaders of his time. His presence alone could shift the balance of a war. Pedro offered him a simple agreement, military support in exchange for treasures. After victory over Trastamara, Pedro kept his promise. Among the treasures he handed over was this stone. The moment it entered Edward's hands, its fate changed. It did not arrive in England as a royal symbol. It arrived as payment, as proof that a debt between rulers had been settled. From the Black Prince, the stone received the name it still carries today, the Black Prince's ruby. Edward did not keep it for long. Years of campaigning had broken his health. He died in 1376, before he could become king. The stone was then moved to the royal treasury at Westminster, placed among relics waiting for future coronations. This was only the beginning of its British journey. Ahead were kings, battles, and decisions that would turn this stone into part of the identity of the monarchy itself. The story of this stone doesn't begin in England. It begins with blood. Seville, 1367. A palace meeting that should never have happened. Abu Sa'id, Prince of Granada, walked into that room knowing his kingdom was dying. City after city, year after year. The Reconquista was a slow blade at his throat. So he came with gifts, fabrics, silver, jewels hidden in his clothing, anything to buy time. Pedro I of Castile received him with smiles, with protocol, with guards at every door. Pedro was called the Cruel for a reason. The meeting was brief, the murder even quicker. When they searched Abu Sa'id's body, they found it, a red stone the size of a plum, hidden in the folds of his clothing. No one asked where he got it. No one wondered why a dying prince carried something so valuable into enemy territory. Pedro took it, added it to his treasury. Within months, his own half-brother rose against him, Enrique de Trastamara, backed by France, backed by fury. Pedro's kingdom crumbled. He needed a miracle. He got Edward of Woodstock, the Black Prince, the man who won at Poitiers, the man whose name made French commanders reconsider their strategies. Pedro made him an offer. Win my war, take my treasures. Edward won. But treasures in a bankrupt kingdom look different. No gold, no coins, just things. And one large red stone that caught lamplight like frozen flame. Red stone, delivered by King Pedro. That's all the English records say. No description, no analysis. In the 14th century, if something was red and hard, you called it a ruby and moved on. The stone arrived in England as payment for blood. Edward died young. Disease, not battle. The stone was sent to Westminster, to the Treasury, into silence. But silence in history, it's only a pause between screams. Henry V didn't rule from throne rooms. He ruled from mud, from rain, from cold dawns before battle. In 1415, preparing for the French campaign, he reviewed the regalia himself. Not ceremony, inventory. That's when he found it, the red stone, already called the Black Prince's ruby. Edward's name had stuck to it like dried blood. Henry saw continuity, legacy, a bridge between Edward's victories and those Henry intended to win. He ordered it set into his helmet, right on the crest, where everyone could see it. The army that crossed the Channel was already half dead. Dysentery, starvation, exhaustion. The French outnumbered them 3-1. But Henry walked ahead of the line. Soldiers wrote later that they could recognize him even in fog, by the red gleam on his helmet, a small star of color in the gray morning. October 25th, 1415. Agincourt. The French were confident. The English were dying. The odds were mathematical. Henry stood at the front anyway. The Duke of Alençon broke through, got close enough to strike, brought his weapon down in an arc meant to split Henry's skull like firewood. The blow landed exactly where the stone was mounted. Metal screamed. The crest bent nearly in half. Henry staggered, dropped to one knee. But the stone didn't move, didn't crack, didn't chip, showed no mark at all. Henry rose, continued fighting, won the battle that should have killed him. And the stone came home with him, clean, perfect, untouched. After Agincourt, Henry kept it close. Every campaign, every siege, no record mentions damage. Henry conquered half of France and died of dysentery at 35. And sitting in the archives in 1813 reading these reports, I felt something cold pass through my chest. A stone that went through Agincourt shouldn't look new. It should carry scars, marks, evidence of impact. This one looked like it had been cut yesterday. Something was wrong. I just didn't know what yet. Everything changed when Elizabeth died. The last Tudor, no heirs, just James of Scotland, coming south to claim an English throne he'd never seen. James I needed legitimacy more than gold, so he reached into the past. He took the stone and ordered it set into the coronation crown, not on the side, not in back, on the front cross, where everyone would see it, where it would declare, "This crown has history, and now that history is mine." The stone became more than treasure then. It became identity. But England had a habit of destroying identity. 40 years later, Charles I lost a war to his own parliament. Lost his head, too, in front of Whitehall, on a January morning so cold the executioner's hands shook. Monarchy abolished. Every symbol of royal power ordered, destroyed. Not hidden, not preserved, destroyed. They dismantled the crown with hammers, melted down the gold, broke the scepters, every valuable item put up for auction, including the Black Prince's ruby. Listed price, £4 sterling, £4. When I first saw this valuation in the parliamentary records, I thought it was a clerical error. Checked 3 times. It wasn't an error. £4, the price of a good pair of boots. Some swords were valued higher. This was the official 1649 price for the stone that survived Agincourt. A question burned in my mind for years. What did the jewelers see? Or, more frightening, what didn't they see? A London jeweler named Daniel Elliot bought it. A royalist, a believer. He kept it hidden for 9 years, through Cromwell's rule, through the Commonwealth. He waited. In 1660, the monarchy returned. Charles II took the throne. Elliot sold him the stone. Not for profit, for restoration, for continuity. The stone returned to the crown, where James had placed it, and the records after that became strangely uniform. By the 18th century, the stone had become part of Britain's theater of power. Every ceremony, every portrait, the crown was worn, stored, examined more than any other relic. When I stood in the archives in February 1813, one thought kept returning. A stone, with such a past, shouldn't look like this. It should have scratches, wear, tiny cracks. Instead, the surface was smooth, clean. And this contradiction, between its history and its appearance, that's what brought me back to the tower that night, because something about this stone was wrong, and I was beginning to suspect what. After the monarchy's restoration in 1660, the stone began appearing in records with new regularity. I studied the craftsmen's notes from that period. Their handwriting was neat, precise, emotionless. Red stone on the front cross. Securely mounted. Not a word more, not a hint of concern. As if the craftsman saw nothing unusual. But reading these lines 150 years later, I already knew. The danger wasn't in what they wrote, but in what they didn't write. Because I'd begun to notice a pattern. 1685, 1686, 1687. Every year, an inspection of the crown jewels. Every year, the same phrases, the same descriptions. And when I first saw this repetition, something quietly shifted inside me. To history, this stone was a storm, violence, war, revolution. But to the documents, still water. Then came 1688, the glorious revolution. The king fled in the night, the country in panic. At that moment they conducted an emergency inspection of the regalia. If a substitution could have been made anywhere in history, it was there. I held that inventory in my hands. The paper was brittle, yellowed at the edges, and again, red stone in excellent condition. No marks. I reread that sentence 7 times. It felt like the ink itself was staring back at me. In 1714, George I took the throne, a foreign monarch, German by birth. The regalia became his greatest argument. They measured weight, size, the exact angle at which the stone sat in its setting, and again, no damage detected. When I read the 1727 inventories, I realized I was gripping the parchment so tightly it might tear. I knew these craftsmen couldn't all have conspired across decades. I knew they couldn't all be blind, and yet they all saw nothing. Or rather, they saw perfection, and no one questioned it. By the 18th century, the stone had become part of what Britain showed the world. No other relic traveled so often. No other stone was touched by so many hands. And that's when I first felt something close to dread. I'd worked in the tower for years. I'd examined all the other stones. Emeralds from India, sapphires from Ceylon, diamonds from Brazil. I knew every flaw, every natural inclusion, every peculiarity that appears from temperature shifts, light exposure, or simple passage of time. But this stone, it was beyond the rules. In 1760, George III took the throne. His reign was long, difficult. After 1788, when his illness became undeniable, the state began acting with a new kind of caution. That's when they started conducting large-scale inventories, one after another, year after year. And in every case, the same words appeared: clean, whole, untouched. 5 reigns, 12 major inventories, hundreds of separate examinations, no flaws, no scratches. I remember sitting in a narrow archival corridor of the tower on a cold January day, a candle on the table smoking, and I was holding a document from 1799. My fingers trembled. For the first time in many years of work, I felt something close to cold fear, because I could no longer explain what I was reading. I'm not a mystic. I don't believe in curses or enchanted objects. I'm a man who trusts only mineralogy. But even mineralogy has limits. And when I traced the journey from Abu Sa'id to George III, from the 14th century to the 19th, I understood something that made my heart clench. Either all the archives were lying, or the stone before me wasn't what Britain believed it to be. In January 1813, I was summoned to the council and ordered to confirm the stone's identity once and for all. Some members whispered about possible substitution. Some quietly spoke about the stone being too perfect. And the old jeweler, a man I'd worked with for 30 years, pulled me aside after the meeting and said in a quiet voice, "George, something that doesn't age always raises questions. You understand that, don't you?" I understood, but I also understood my duty. So I held firm. I conducted an examination under controlled light, made my measurements, reviewed the historical records one last time, and then I stood before the council and said what my title demanded. The stone is genuine. It is the same stone documented in the regalia since the time of James I. There is no evidence of substitution. They nodded, relieved. The question was settled, but something inside me cracked, because I hadn't told them everything. I hadn't told them what I suspected. And that night, February 10th, 1813, around 3 a.m, I found myself in the tower, alone in the hall where the crown was kept, alone with the portable microscope I'd brought from my workshop, alone with a history that no longer added up. The crown sat on a velvet cushion under the dim light of 2 oil lamps, heavy, ancient, the gold dulled by age, other stones catching faint glimmers of light. But the red stone on the front cross, it gleamed, as if it had been cut yesterday. I set up the microscope with hands that felt steadier than they should have been, perhaps because I'd already made my choice. Perhaps because some part of me had known the truth for weeks and was only now ready to see it confirmed. I adjusted the lens, checked the light source, leaned closer, and looked. The first thing I saw was clarity. No inclusions, no internal cracks, no tiny gas bubbles. The kind of flaws present in every natural stone. In this stone there was nothing. I slowly rotated it under the lens. Still nothing. Then I switched to polarized light, a test that reveals the optical properties of a natural stone. Ruby doubly refracts light. When light enters, it splits into 2 rays, each moving at different speeds. This is one of the defining characteristics of corundum. Unmistakable. I aligned the stone, adjusted the polarizer, held my breath, and saw. 1 ray. Not 2. 1. Pure. Unified. I checked again, rotated the polarizer, changed the angle. Still 1 ray. My heart was pounding now. But my hands were absolutely steady, because I was no longer uncertain. I knew. This isn't a ruby. It's a spinel, magnesium aluminum oxide. Rarer than ruby in stones this size, harder than most people think, more stable under stress, and in the finest specimens, like this one, capable of a red so deep, so pure, that for centuries it was mistaken for the king of gemstones. I stepped back from the microscope and let the realization wash over me like cold water. For 450 years, the kings and queens of England wore a stone more valuable than they knew. They called it the Black Prince's Ruby, a name older than the science that could correct them. They carried it to war, revolution, ceremony. They set it in the crown as a symbol of their divine right. And all that time it was something else, something rarer, something stronger, something that doesn't break easily, something that doesn't age like rubies do. Because spinel is one of the hardest stones on earth, I thought about Henry V at Agincourt, the Duke of Alençon's blow, the strike that should have killed him, the strike that landed exactly where this stone was mounted. A ruby would have shattered. But spinel endured. I closed the microscope, extinguished one of the lamps, sat in the cold silence of the tower, and let myself feel the weight of what I'd just confirmed. The stone hadn't lied. History simply hadn't known the right questions to ask.